Good day, folks. I got to catch you up on the weekend there. This past Saturday was May 19th, and I was invited to go up to Norwich University up in Northfield, Vermont, by Bernie Sanders. Yep, you see, he sent out a mailing to all the veterans, and I'm a veteran. So I got the mail and I said, hey, Bernie's inviting me up to hear what he's got to say about veterans. So I went on up there. And he had quite the assortment of supporters up there with him. He had quite a group. It was a pretty good turnout of his supporters. There was a list of them, and it's attached in the letter I'm attaching with this video. But there are a lot of the support groups for the veterans going through certain things, and the discussion was mostly about the Veterans Administration. So I'm scrolling through over here on my other computer because I got my notes over there. So, you know, I agreed with a lot that Bernie said. He supports the veterans, and he's in support of a lot of the support groups, and I support all of that. And so it was pretty good meeting a lot of people and seeing what they all do. But I'm going to go through, and even though I agree with most of what Bernie said on this topic of the Veterans Administration, I'm just going to touch on a few things we differ on, just so you all know. All right? So, one of the first things Bernie brought up was the privatization of the VA, which he's 100% against. And to tell you the truth, I'm not in favor of the privatization of the VA either. I believe that it is a government function. And the reason that is because I got to ask myself, would we privatize the military? And for the function of our military to protect our constitutional republic, no, I would not privatize the military. I understand there's privatization of certain guard units that cover certain operations overseas. I understand that. I don't have a problem with that. But the military is a function of the U.S. government, and that's ours. And I also believe that the Veterans Administration is a function of the people leaving the active duty military and transitioning into civilian life, and the VA is supposed to coordinate what they've earned during their time in the armed services. So I guess we agree on that topic too, that the Veterans Administration is a function of the United States government. So we got going down through some discussion, and I did notice one thing I learned was Bernie's definition of privatization versus a function of the government. And he looks at privatization as being for the shareholders. And he looks at the government as being for you. Well, I'm not so sure if I agree with that analysis. You see, for privatization, they're not all for profit. You have for profit, you have not for profit. So you have to separate on what you're talking about in the first place. For profit, yes, they're for profit. They're for the shareholder. They're for their, in order to make the shareholder prosper, the customer really needs to prosper, or they're not going to be prospering as a company for very long. So there's a check and balances there that we use with our dollars. Not for profit is a little bit different situation. And it fits more in line what he's calling what the government is for. It's for you. All right. So for we the people is the way I put it. Now, the way I look at it, I don't look at the Veterans Administration as being a benefit, so to speak. I look at it as being more of something that was earned by the soldiers, and the VA is more of a responsibility that we as a nation have toward our veterans. All right, it's not a free benefit. the veterans paid for it, all right? The ones who made it through. So going on through, the question comes about the quality of care that the VA can provide. Now, I learned something, all right? There's good and bad in everything, right? We can agree on that. It seems like the common thread is finding the way to get what you earned, to receive your benefit of serving, right? That's where the quagmire is. Very difficult to get through the paperwork to find what you've earned. So, before we went in the military, we had to undergo an extensive physical, right? So that the military only took healthy people. When we got out of the military, we had to undergo a physical. I'm not going to say it was the extent of the enlistment one, but we did undergo a physical. And the reason for that physical was because the military received a healthy individual from the civil people, from the civilian population, and they are to return a healthy individual to the civilian population. If there is a flaw in that, the flaw is owned by the United States Armed Services, and thereby the Veterans Administration are the administrator to take care for the flaw. There are also what I would call benefits for those who have been discharged from the military, which they may or may not have had an injury occur while they were in service, which could be questionable, but services can be rendered by the Veterans Administration in certain circumstances if certain parameters are met. So, with that being said, let me scroll down to my next section here. So, it seemed like there was a common occurrence of, there you are to see my face, a common occurrence of people not being able to find the resources that they earned and deserved with the Veterans Administration. It was a difficulty. Too much paperwork. A lot of the paperwork, when it was filled out, if they could figure out how to fill it out, was denied sometimes. And it was really difficult getting things taken care of. And I call that, they had a difficulty redressing grievances they had when they were denied benefits or had other certain things that occurred that they were trying to get corrected. And when they went through the correction process, the redress of grievance, they were hitting snares. So that's more of the government I'm familiar with. You know, we put them in charge of securing our liberties. And then when we go to collect on our liberties, it seems like they have certain difficulties delivering them back to us. And I'll give you an example for all you who are familiar with the motor vehicle department. If you've ever been there and you experience the you bow to me type thing, instead of them being our public servants, we get this little attitude thing that occurs. So that's what I noticed was kept being brought up from people in the audience about discussion. Now, a couple things that were brought up that I agree with. I believe that when a soldier approaches his separation date, his or her separation date, that they should be given veteran administration training by a civilian. It's very important that it be by a civilian because that's where they're heading to. Where a lifelong military person hasn't been there for 20 years or more. So to have a civilian go through some re-civilian training and give training on what is available, what have you earned that the VA supplies and how to get it. It's missing. I think if we send our veterans through that, their last month for a whole month, their last month of active duty or the month right after, I think they should still be on the payroll so they're not looking to run out and run off right quick, and go through and understand how the VA works, how what they've earned, they're calling it benefits, what they've earned, how they can collect on them, who the resources are to help them out get through the paperwork and get into whatever they have earned in the Veterans Administration. There's another thing that gets brought up. There's a lot of soldiers who have been injured during active duty time, and their caregivers are going through quite a time. And a lot of them are stranded out there. That's not what we should be doing with our wounded. All right, and it's not what we should be doing with our wounded caregivers. They need support. They need to know how to get support. They're serving our country, just as their soldier who they're taking care of served. Those caretakers are serving our country. All right? It's our responsibility. We didn't give them back their soldier 100% full. Well, guess who's responsible for that? That's us. All right? We need to respect and care for our caregivers and give them the support they need. Vitally important. So one of the gray grounds out there is, what do you do with veterans who didn't receive their ailment during military time but after they got out of the service? This is where I would consider it more of a benefit than a duty. But room for discussion there. But I'm going to finish this recording right now because of time constraint, and I am going to get right back onto you with the next set of circumstances. Be right back.